There was a tragedy here at Flying Baron Estates yesterday at 10 a.m. involving the lead guitar player, Randy Rhoads, 25-year-old talented guitar player for the Ozzy Osbourne Band.
Randy Rhoads didn't just change guitar playing, he rewrote the very rules of what the instrument could do. His technique was revolutionary, blending the speed and power of heavy metal with the discipline and elegance of classical music. By the early 1980s, he had already carved out his place in history as the virtuoso who gave Ozzy Osbourne's solo career its spark. But his meteoric ascent ended in one of rock's most eerie tragedies, a fall so abrupt, so brutal that it still haunts fans, friends, and historians more than 40 years later. And now, as new theories and appalling new details keep emerging, people are wondering if Randy's death was indeed merely a wild accident or something much more sinister, something hidden behind official accounts and half-shared testimonies. Was it actually just a wild joyride that went awry? Or might the reality turn out to be a good deal more sinister? Because what's coming into view isn't merely calling into question the official narrative. It may imply a series of decisions, coincidences, and misplaced details that collectively create a much darker tale. If you're reading this, you already feel it. You've heard the rumors, the speculation, the whispers that won't quit. You've seen how the story never quite added up. Now, let's dive deep into what really happened on that morning in Florida and why so many people still aren't convinced it was just a freak crash. The tragedy unfolded at exactly 10 a.m. on March 19, 1982, sending shockwaves through the music world. A small Beechcraft Bonanza F-35 aircraft, piloted by 36-year-old Andrew Aycock, crashed in Leesburg, Florida. Boarded were Randy Rhoads, only 25 and already deemed a genius, and Rachel Youngblood, 58-year-old seamstress who was adored by the band. The flight took just 5 minutes. During that short time, it initiated one of rock's most tragic accidents. The wing of the plane struck Ozzy Osbourne's tour bus before careening out of control and crashing into a pine tree before ultimately hitting a garage. The raging explosion instantly killed all 3 passengers. It was heartbreaking. The death of one of rock music's most promising stars in the midst of his creative prime. The group had pulled over at Flying Baron Estates earlier that day to fix the malfunctioning air conditioning system of the tour bus. It was going to be a mere pit stop before leaving for their next show. It turned into the scene of tragedy instead. The stolen plane was flown by Aycock. Not only was he the band's driver, but he was a certified pilot as well. However, his medical clearance had lapsed, so his flight was not only irresponsible but illegal as well. The National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, subsequently blamed the crash on poor judgment. Their report indicated that Aycock had flown the plane on a joyride, buzzing over the sleeping band on the tour bus as a joke. But on the third run, something went horribly wrong. The left wing scraped the bus roof, was torn off, and flung the plane nose-first into a garage. The subsequent explosion was devastating, leveling the garage, the plane, and its occupants to smoldering ruin. Witnesses painted the picture as apocalyptic. Don Airey, the keyboard player for the band, and Rudy Sarzo, the bass player, stood helpless as the plane erupted in flames and smoke. Sarzo would later describe it as looking like a war zone, scattered debris, raging flames, and bodies unrecognizable. It was chaos and tragedy, all rolled into one. But even in the initial aftermath, doubts were raised. Was the crash simply a careless stunt that went awry, or was there more involved? Airey said he witnessed more than innocent buzzing. From his telephoto, he saw movement in the cockpit, wings yawing wildly, the airplane shuddering as if being wrestled. He felt something was amiss even before the plane hit. And then there's the chilling reality that Randy Rhoads didn't even want to be on the plane in the first place. He disliked flying. He tried to avoid it whenever he could. So, why did he board that morning? Friends say he only went up because he insisted on taking aerial shots of the estate for his mother, who always encouraged his career. It was to be a peaceful, innocuous flight. Rachel Youngblood had her reservations as well. She had a heart condition and informed Aycock that she didn't want any craziness. Aycock assured her it would be simple, no stunts, no danger. just a couple of flybys in the air. But within minutes, it became fatal. Randy's last few hours were typical of every day on the road. The previous evening, March 18th, the band had performed in Knoxville, Tennessee. Following the concert, they all climbed aboard the bus and set off overnight for Orlando, Florida. However, during the early hours, the bus experienced issues with its air conditioning. The choice was made to make a stop at Flying Baron Estates, an air park constructed around private runways. The tired band and crew pulled in the bus, some sleeping, others getting out to stretch. Aycock, antsy, and irresponsible opted to fly. Around 9 a.m., he took his first joyride with tour manager Jake Duncan and Don Airy. He flew low over the bus, chuckling as it shook those remaining inside, then landed safely. It was handled like a joke, another thrill on the road. But not for Aycock. One flight wasn't enough for him. He took Rachel and Randy on the second flight. Both were hesitant. Both had good reasons to turn him down. But both went. The aircraft departed at about 9:50 a.m. What occurred in the ensuing 10 minutes is where testimony fractures. Airy, who had his camera with him, saw that the flight was not smooth. The wings wobbled erratically. The cockpit appeared disorganized. On the third pass of the bus, the wing hit the rooftop. The aircraft disintegrated, struck a tree, and crashed into a garage. It was engulfed by fire. There were no survivors. This is where the tragedy gets deeper. Randy wasn't even on the plane he was supposed to be on. Rudy Sarzo was. He and Randy pretty much did everything together on tour, but that morning Rudy was exhausted and decided to sleep in instead. He would later say that decision tortured him. He was where he was supposed to be. If he had been there, perhaps Randy wouldn't have been. Survivor's guilt plagued him. But Rudy also thinks Randy deflected lives in his last seconds. The manner in which the plane nipped the bus but did not run directly through it indicated to him that Randy, sensing the crash was imminent, perhaps took control of the plane and deflected it just far enough to not directly hit the bus. Randy saved us. Rudy has stated, he is sure it was Randy's ultimate gesture of selflessness. Others still have their own speculations. Bob Daisley, Ozzy's ex-bassist, posited a different explanation. He thinks Rachel could have had a heart attack in midair. Since the Beechcraft Bonanza aircraft had dual controls, if she fell on top of them, it might have pushed the plane into disarray. Daisley cited autopsy reports that Rachel had experienced cardiac distress prior to crashing. If true, it wasn't merely reckless flying, it was a sad freak medical crisis that drove the plane out of control. But Aycock's history makes this difficult. Cocaine was present in his system, according to his toxicology report. Witnesses indicated he had been out partying the previous night. He hadn't passed legally to fly. His medical certification had lapsed. More frightening, he had crashed and killed someone years before in a crash in the United Arab Emirates. 2 crashes, 2 fatalities, same pilot. That coincidence was disturbing to many. Rumors go a step further, hinting that Aycock's former wife was standing close to the bus that day. Were his thrilling flybys merely pranks, or were they targets for her, fits of anger masquerading as stunts? If this is the case, then the crash was more than an accident. It might have been angry, drug-induced recklessness with intent. As the theories spin, one thing is certain: Randy Rhoads was already planning to leave the rock life behind. Young as he was, he had told family and friends that he intended to go back to school to study classical music seriously at UCLA. He loved Ozzy, he loved heavy metal, but he wanted something else. He wanted to write, to teach, to further his craft. His mother even started inquiring about courses on his behalf. He wasn't fantasizing, he was scheming. And then, in a burst of fire and smoke, it vanished. For Ozzy, the loss was catastrophic. He called Randy a gift from God and acknowledged he came close to quitting music following his death. The two complemented each other so well, Ozzy's mayhem and Randy's structure. Their albums Blizzard of Oz and Diary of a Madman forever changed heavy metal. Randy saved Ozzy's career, according to many, and Ozzy himself never denied it. Randy's impact did not stop with that garage blaze. Guitarists of all generations continue to cite him as their influence. Tom Morello, Kirk Hammett, Zakk Wylde all point to Randy's marrying of classical and metal as a life changer. His solos are taught in music schools, his name spoken with awe, and yet his death is a wound, at least in part, due to all the unresolved questions. Why did Randy, terrified of flying, say yes that morning? Why did no one stop Aycock, a driver high on cocaine with no valid license, from taking a plane? Why did the official report smooth over the contradictions eyewitnesses described? Why do people close to the band continue to propose alternate explanations decades later? The morning of March 19, 1982, was supposed to be business as usual. It turned out to be one of rock's worst days. And as the years went by, the questions grew deeper. Pilot suicide? A medical crisis? Drugs and stunts? Or something sinister? The truth is piecemeal, cobbled together from grainy photos, conflicting testimony, autopsy records, and survivors' recollections dulled by trauma. What is certain is this: Randy Rhoads didn't have any business being in that plane. His tale should have had more pages. His brilliance should have grown, changed, and influenced for decades longer. Instead, the world had to settle for only 2 albums, a few live tracks, and the perpetual question, what if? What if Rudy had taken that plane? What if the band had held off on stopping? What if Randy had said no? We might never find closure. The crash is still one of the greatest tragedies and mysteries of rock music. But Randy's legacy is not only in the notes he had played, but in the potential for the notes he never got to play. And perhaps that's why, even today, fans and musicians alike can't release the questions. So, then what do you think actually occurred to Randy Rhoads? Was it a senseless tragedy or something else?